The unmarked fatigues felt foreign against Lieutenant Sarah Chen's skin as she approached the gates of Naval Training Center, San Diego. After 6 years with SEAL Team 6, the absence of her Trident insignia created an uncomfortable void where her identity usually resided. The morning California sun cast sharp shadows across the concrete barriers while Marine guards processed her temporary identification with routine efficiency. Admiral James Morrison's office occupied the 3rd floor of the command building, its windows overlooking the sprawling training complex where hundreds of recruits learned the fundamentals of naval service. Chen knocked twice and entered at his gruff invitation, finding the silver-haired commander reviewing a thick manila folder marked with red classification stamps. Morrison looked up with steel-gray eyes that had seen 3 decades of military service. The mission briefing lasted exactly 12 minutes. Reports of systematic harassment and discrimination had surfaced from multiple training units, with particular concerns centered on Alpha Company's recent recruit class. 3 female personnel had filed complaints through unofficial channels, claiming their formal reports had vanished into administrative limbo. Chen's assignment required complete anonymity. She would integrate into the mess hall staff under the supervision of Mess Sergeant Rodriguez, a career Navy cook who managed food service for 800 personnel. Her SEAL background would remain classified while she documented harassment patterns and identified the command structure failures that allowed such behavior to flourish. If you've ever worked in an environment where people underestimated your capabilities because of how you looked or where you came from, you understand the challenge Chen faced. Whether you're watching from Texas, New York, or anywhere else in this great country, that feeling of being dismissed before proving yourself resonates across every profession and every state. The mess hall stretched across 2,000 square feet of industrial kitchen space and dining areas designed for efficiency rather than comfort. Stainless steel serving lines reflected fluorescent lighting, while the constant hum of refrigeration units provided background noise to the clatter of preparation work. Rodriguez welcomed her with calloused hands and a genuine smile, explaining the dinner service routine with practiced precision. Evening chow brought the first glimpse of Alpha Company's dynamics. 15 recruits moved through the serving line with the casual arrogance of young men who had learned to claim space through volume and attitude. Their leader, recruit Blake Matthews, stood 6 feet tall with the broad shoulders of a former high school linebacker. His voice carried across the dining area as he directed subtle commands that his followers obeyed without question. Chen observed Matthews orchestrating the group's behavior with calculated precision. When female personnel approached the condiment station, his recruits would cluster nearby, creating an atmosphere of territorial intimidation without crossing obvious lines of conduct violations. The pack mentality revealed itself through synchronized laughter at crude jokes and the way conversations died when women passed their table. Matthews made eye contact with Chun exactly once during the dinner service. His assessment lasted 3 seconds before dismissing her as irrelevant kitchen staff. That single moment of casual disregard told Chen everything she needed to know about his worldview and the institutional blind spots that had allowed his behavior to escalate without consequences. Rodriguez finished the evening cleanup with military efficiency, while Chun memorized faces, documented behavioral patterns, and prepared her first encrypted report for Admiral Morrison. The investigation had begun, though none of the participants yet understood they were being studied by one of the Navy's most elite warriors. Dawn revealed the mess hall's industrial rhythm as Chun arrived for her first full shift. Rodriguez handed her a hairnet and serving apron while explaining the breakfast protocols with military precision. 200 recruits would cycle through in 90-minute windows, demanding efficiency that left no room for hesitation or error. Alpha Company appeared during the second wave, their coordinated arrival disrupting the orderly flow. Matthews led his core group with the confidence of established hierarchy. Tommy Rodriguez, a wiry recruit from El Paso, served as Matthews' primary enforcer through quick wit and cruel observations. Marcus Webb brought physical intimidation with his linebacker frame and dead eyes that assessed everyone as potential targets. Jake Sullivan completed the inner circle, a former fraternity president whose charm masked calculating cruelty. Chun served scrambled eggs and bacon while cataloging their interaction patterns. Matthews commanded through subtle gestures and meaningful glances that his followers interpreted with practiced accuracy. When female recruits approached the serving line, the group would shift positions to create psychological pressure without obvious misconduct. The breakfast conversation revealed their methodology. Sullivan made offhand comments about women taking spots from qualified men, while Webb nodded agreement, and Tommy Rodriguez added statistical claims about physical fitness failures. Matthews never participated directly, maintaining plausible deniability while his subordinates expressed increasingly aggressive opinions. Chin's serving role provided perfect camouflage for observation. The recruits dismissed her as invisible kitchen help, allowing their guard to drop completely. Matthews requested extra bacon with the entitled expectation of immediate compliance, demonstrating how he had trained the mess staff to accommodate his demands through persistent pressure. Petty Officer First Class Davis entered during the tail end of breakfast service, his exhausted demeanor revealing the strain of managing problematic recruits. Davis had spent 8 years as a drill instructor, but Alpha Company's coordinated resistance had worn down his enforcement capabilities. He observed Matthews' group with the frustrated recognition of someone fighting a losing battle against institutional inertia. Rodriguez pulled Chin aside during the cleaning break, his weathered face creased with concern. 3 female recruits had approached him separately over the past month, describing harassment incidents that made them uncomfortable reporting through official channels. Their complaints detailed verbal intimidation, deliberate physical blocking, and coordinated exclusion from group activities. The unofficial reports painted a disturbing pattern. Matthews and his core group had refined their techniques to operate just below the threshold of actionable misconduct. They understood which behaviors would trigger formal investigation and calibrated their harassment to remain in gray areas that commanded structure struggled to address effectively. Chun discovered the suppressed documentation during lunch preparation while accessing personnel files through Rodriguez's terminal. The 3 complaints had been filed with Davis, who forwarded them to company leadership where they disappeared into administrative processing delays. Each report described identical tactics, suggesting systematic rather than spontaneous behavior. Matthews demonstrated his influence during the lunch service by demanding fresh fruit from the kitchen reserves. When the initial serving ran out, he approached Chin directly with expectation that she would accommodate his request. His tone carried subtle threat wrapped in military courtesy, the kind of manipulation that worked on personnel who lacked authority to refuse. Webb and Sullivan flanked Matthews during the interaction, their presence adding unspoken pressure to his demand. Chun complied, while internally noting how they coordinated intimidation through positioning and silence. The fruit request succeeded because resistance would have created confrontation that kitchen staff were trained to avoid. Davis witnessed the exchange from across the dining area, but made no intervention. His passive observation confirmed Chin's assessment that command structure had abdicated responsibility for managing Matthews' influence. The drill instructor's inaction stemmed from administrative exhaustion rather than approval, but the effect enabled continued harassment. Evening brought Chin's first encrypted communication with Admiral Morrison. Using Rodriguez's office computer after hours, she transmitted detailed behavioral observations and documentation of suppressed complaints. The evidence painted a picture of institutional failure that extended beyond individual misconduct to systematic command negligence. Her SEAL Team 6 handler confirmed receipt through secure channels, adding intelligence about similar patterns reported at other training facilities. Matthews represented a broader problem that threatened military cohesion and readiness. Chin's mission had evolved from simple investigation to critical assessment of institutional vulnerability. The day's observations revealed Matthews' sophisticated understanding of military bureaucracy and his ability to exploit administrative gaps. His harassment campaign operated within carefully calculated boundaries that made formal response difficult, while creating an environment of fear and exclusion for female personnel. Morning light filtered through the mess hall windows as Chun arranged fresh fruit displays with methodical precision. 3 days of observation had established her routine among the kitchen staff, creating the perfect camouflage for continued surveillance. Rodriguez trusted her competence while the recruits had grown accustomed to her invisible presence behind the serving line. Matthews entered with his usual confidence, leading Alpha Company through their breakfast ritual with practiced authority. His scanning gaze swept across the serving area before settling on Chun with new attention. Something had shifted in his assessment, though she maintained her focus on portioning scrambled eggs while tracking his movement through peripheral vision. The first comment came from Sullivan as he approached her station. His voice carried just enough volume to reach his companions while maintaining plausible deniability with supervising staff. Women in military kitchens reminded him of his mother's failed attempts at cooking. He announced with casual cruelty designed to establish Chun as a target rather than invisible background. Tommy Rodriguez joined the verbal assault with calculated precision, suggesting that female kitchen workers probably couldn't handle the pressure of feeding real warriors. His tone mixed false concern with obvious mockery, while Webb nodded agreement and added observations about physical weakness that made military service inappropriate for most women. Chun served their portions with steady hands that betrayed none of the combat readiness flowing through her nervous system. 6 years with SEAL Team 6 had taught her to recognize predatory behavior in its early stages. Matthews was orchestrating a harassment campaign with the same tactical thinking she had observed in enemy combatants testing defensive positions. The group settled at their usual table while continuing the conversation at volume designed to ensure Chun overheard every word. Matthews contributed his first direct comment, questioning whether women understood the sacred nature of military service or simply viewed it as employment opportunity. His philosophical tone masked the personal attack while establishing intellectual justification for discriminatory behavior. Recruit Danny Park entered the dining area during the escalating discussion, his uncomfortable expression revealing internal conflict about his platoon's direction. Park came from a military family where respect for service transcended gender, but social pressure from his peers created impossible choices between principle and belonging. Chin finished the breakfast service while documenting each recruit's participation level in her mental files. Matthews had expanded his inner circle's harassment to include broader audience participation through strategic positioning and leading questions. The technique demonstrated sophisticated understanding of group psychology and crowd manipulation. Rodriguez approached Chun during the cleaning period, his weathered face showing concern about the morning's atmosphere. He had witnessed enough military harassment to recognize escalating patterns, but his position as mess hall supervisor provided limited authority over recruit behavior. His quiet warning about staying alert confirmed that others had noticed the shifting dynamics. Lunch service brought direct physical intimidation as Webb positioned himself to block Chen's path while she carried full serving trays. The obstruction appeared accidental to casual observers, but the timing and placement revealed deliberate intent to create difficulty and potential embarrassment. Chun navigated around him with professional composure while logging the escalation in her mission assessment. Matthews observed Webb's technique with approval, suggesting through meaningful glances that physical interference represented acceptable harassment methodology. Sullivan immediately adopted the tactic by standing in doorways while Chun attempted to restock supplies, forcing her to request passage while he made exaggerated gestures of surprised accommodation. The coordinated blocking escalated throughout the lunch period as multiple recruits began interfering with Chen's movement patterns. Their synchronized timing created the appearance of coincidental obstacles, while systematically making her job more difficult and potentially dangerous when carrying hot food or sharp implements. Petty Officer Davis witnessed several blocking incidents, but maintained his pattern of non-intervention that had characterized his recent leadership approach. His exhausted recognition of the harassment combined with bureaucratic paralysis to create effective protection for the perpetrators while leaving Chun isolated within the toxic environment. Chen's afternoon equipment cleaning provided opportunity for private documentation as she accessed Rodriguez's computer terminal. Her encrypted report to Admiral Morrison detailed the escalation from general misogyny to targeted harassment, with specific emphasis on the coordinated nature, suggesting planned campaign rather than spontaneous behavior. The behavioral pattern matched intelligence from other installations where systematic harassment had created hostile environments that drove qualified female personnel from service. Matthews possessed both the intellectual capability and leadership influence to orchestrate institutional damage that extended far beyond individual victim impact. Evening preparation brought Matthews' most direct statement as he approached Chen's workstation with Sullivan and Webb flanking him like ceremonial guards. His request for special meal accommodation carried undertones of command expectation, while his positioning trapped her between the serving counter and industrial equipment with no easy escape route. When Chun politely explained that special requests required supervisor approval, Matthews stepped closer with a smile that never reached his calculating eyes. His response suggested that kitchen workers should understand their role in supporting the warriors who protected their freedom, implying that her resistance demonstrated insufficient appreciation for military hierarchy. The confrontation concluded with Matthews announcing to his assembled followers that some people needed education about showing proper respect to those who earned their place through merit rather than diversity requirements. His departing statement carried clear threat wrapped in ideological justification, marking Chun as a target for systematic intimidation. Rodriguez returned to find Chun completing her duties with the same professional efficiency she had maintained throughout the escalating harassment. His concerned inquiry about her well-being received reassuring response, though both understood that Alpha Company had declared war on their peaceful kitchen environment. Chen's evening report included tactical assessment of Matthews' capabilities and recommendation for enhanced monitoring protocols. The harassment campaign showed sophistication that suggested military academy training or extensive study of psychological warfare techniques. Her mission parameters required enduring escalation until patterns were fully documented, regardless of personal risk. Matthews spent the morning recruiting beyond his core group, expanding Alpha Company's harassment campaign to include recruits who had previously maintained neutrality. His strategic conversations during physical training sessions emphasized unit cohesion and the importance of addressing personnel who failed to respect military traditions and warrior culture. The lunch service revealed the results of his overnight organizing efforts. All 15 Alpha Company recruits coordinated their arrival within a 5-minute window, creating an overwhelming presence that dominated the dining area atmosphere. Their synchronized movement patterns and shared glances confirmed Matthews had briefed them on specific tactical objectives. Chun served meatloaf and mashed potatoes while the coordinated harassment began with industrial precision. Sullivan deliberately knocked his water glass toward her serving station, requiring cleanup that disrupted the serving line flow. Webb followed immediately by claiming his portion was insufficient and demanding additional servings while blocking access for personnel behind him. Tommy Rodriguez initiated the verbal component by loudly questioning whether kitchen staff understood proper portion control, suggesting that civilian mentality created waste of taxpayer resources. His comments triggered supportive responses from the expanded group as they developed themes about military standards and civilian inadequacy. The spilling escalated as Matthews approached Chen's station and stumbled dramatically while receiving his portion, sending gravy across the serving counter and onto her uniform. His immediate apology carried theatrical sincerity, while his followers expressed concern about her clumsiness in handling military personnel. The manufactured accident required extensive cleanup that backed up the entire serving process. Davis observed the coordinated disruption from his supervisory position near the dining area entrance. His recognition of deliberate harassment conflicted with training protocols that emphasized recruit autonomy during meal periods. Administrative guidance required documented evidence of conduct violations before disciplinary intervention, creating paralysis when facing sophisticated psychological campaigns. Chun maintained her distressed civilian persona while internally cataloging each participant's specific contributions to the harassment pattern. Her SEAL training identified the tactical coordination and leadership hierarchy driving the campaign, but mission parameters demanded she endure escalation until complete documentation was achieved. The blocking tactics evolved into complete movement restriction as multiple recruits positioned themselves to create human barriers around Chen's workstation. Their conversations about military standards and proper respect created justification for remaining stationary, while effectively trapping her within a confined space surrounded by hostile personnel. Rodriguez pulled Chun aside during the brief lull between lunch and dinner preparation, his frustration evident in the privacy of the storage room. 3 weeks of escalating harassment had created impossible working conditions, while command structure proved incapable of addressing coordinated psychological warfare that operated below formal misconduct thresholds. His revelation about previous complaints detailed administrative black holes where harassment reports disappeared into bureaucratic processing delays. Female personnel learned to expect months of investigation, during which their working conditions deteriorated, while perpetrators faced no consequences for continued misconduct. Chen's afternoon equipment maintenance provided opportunity for encrypted communication with Admiral Morrison. Though her report required careful balance between documenting harassment severity and maintaining operational security. The coordinated campaign demonstrated institutional vulnerability that extended beyond individual recruit behavior to systematic command failure. The dinner service brought Matthew's most significant escalation as he grabbed Chen's arm while she served his portion, claiming she had been unsteady with the serving spoon. His grip lasted 3 seconds longer than necessary, while he maintained eye contact that conveyed both dominance and threat wrapped in false concern for kitchen safety. Webb immediately supported the interaction by suggesting that clumsy personnel created safety hazards for military members who depended on reliable support services. Sullivan added observations about stress affecting civilian workers who lacked military training for high-pressure environments. Their coordinated response transformed assault into group concern about workplace safety. The physical contact triggered Chen's combat reflexes, requiring conscious effort to suppress SEAL training that would have ended the threat through immediate neutralization. Her mission parameters demanded enduring escalation regardless of personal safety considerations, creating internal conflict between tactical instincts and operational requirements. Other mess hall personnel began avoiding the Alpha Company area during meal services, their withdrawal creating isolation around Chun that amplified the harassment impact. Kitchen staff members diverted their movement patterns to minimize contact with a hostile environment, while supervisory personnel maintained strategic distance from confrontations they felt powerless to address. Davis witnessed Matthew's physical contact, but his intervention consisted of clipboard documentation rather than immediate disciplinary action. His adherence to administrative procedure, while female personnel faced assault, demonstrated the institutional paralysis that enabled sophisticated harassment campaigns to operate with effective impunity. Chen's evening report included tactical assessment that Matthews understood military bureaucracy sufficiently to exploit systemic weaknesses that protected perpetrators while isolating victims. His campaign showed advanced planning and leadership capabilities that suggested formal training in psychological operations or extensive study of institutional manipulation techniques. The encrypted communication concluded with Chen's recommendation for enhanced monitoring protocols as the harassment pattern approached dangerous escalation thresholds. Her SEAL experience recognized predatory behavior that typically preceded serious violence when allowed to develop without meaningful intervention. Matthews gathered his expanded group after evening chow for what appeared to be tactical planning session disguised as casual conversation. Their positioning near Chen's cleaning station allowed her to overhear references to teaching proper respect and ensuring kitchen personnel understood their subordinate role in supporting warrior culture. The planning session concluded with Matthews announcing that tomorrow's dinner service would provide opportunity for comprehensive education about military hierarchy and civilian obligations. His tone carried anticipation that suggested the harassment campaign was building toward a climactic confrontation designed to achieve complete dominance over their target. Rodriguez completed the evening cleanup while expressing concern about the deteriorating situation and his inability to protect kitchen staff from coordinated intimidation campaigns. His frustration reflected broader institutional failure, where harassment victims remained vulnerable while perpetrators operated with effective immunity through sophisticated exploitation of administrative gaps. Admiral Morrison arrived at his office before dawn, reviewing Chen's overnight intelligence report with the focused intensity that had characterized his 30-year military career. Her documentation revealed harassment escalation approaching dangerous thresholds that required immediate intervention planning while maintaining operational security around her classified mission. His secure communications with base security coordinated subtle positioning protocols that would place response assets within 60 seconds of the mess hall without alerting Alpha Company to surveillance presence. Master Chief Patterson received orders to station personnel in adjacent buildings under routine maintenance pretenses while maintaining direct visual contact with dining area entrances. Chen's morning briefing came through encrypted channels embedded within routine kitchen supply communications. Her mission parameters evolved to authorize cover termination when physical threat became imminent, though operational success required documenting the harassment campaign's full scope before revealing her identity to maximize institutional impact. Matthews spent breakfast coordinating his expanded campaign beyond Alpha Company boundaries, recruiting supporters from Beta and Charlie companies through appeals to unit pride and masculine solidarity. His rhetoric positioned the kitchen harassment as defending military standard against civilian encroachment that threatened warrior culture and combat readiness. The recruitment efforts produced 12 additional volunteers eager to participate in what Matthews described as educational demonstration about proper military hierarchy and civilian respect for service members. His tactical briefing emphasized overwhelming presence and psychological dominance, while avoiding conduct that would trigger immediate disciplinary response. Dr. Sarah Kim received Matthews' psychological evaluation file as part of her routine review process, though administrative delays had prevented earlier assessment despite multiple conduct indicators. Her analysis identified concerning patterns suggesting narcissistic personality disorder combined with sophisticated manipulation capabilities that made him extremely dangerous when challenged. Chen observed the expanded recruitment during lunch preparation as Matthews coordinated with personnel from 3 different companies. Their whispered conversations and meaningful glances confirmed systematic planning for the evening confrontation, while their numbers grew beyond what kitchen security protocols could reasonably address through normal channels. The afternoon brought Matthews' final briefing session disguised as recreational conversation near the recreation center, where Chung could overhear strategic elements while maintaining her kitchen duties. His plan involved cornering her in the storage area after dinner service, when supervisory personnel had departed and response options were limited. Rodriguez discovered Chun organizing supply inventory with unusual thoroughness, her methodical approach suggesting preparation for significant disruption. His attempt to warn her about the evening's dangerous atmosphere met reassuring response that masked her activation of emergency beacon protocols linking directly to Admiral Morrison's command center. Base psychologist Kim contacted Admiral Morrison with urgent recommendation for immediate intervention based on Matthews' psychological profile and escalation pattern assessment. Her analysis predicted violence threshold would be crossed during the planned confrontation, creating liability and safety issues that demanded preemptive action regardless of ongoing investigation requirements. The dinner service began with unprecedented tension as 27 recruits coordinated their arrival within Alpha Company's operational timeframe. Their synchronized positioning created overwhelming presence that dominated the dining atmosphere, while maintaining plausible deniability about coordinated harassment intent. Chun served the evening meal while tracking personnel positioning through peripheral awareness enhanced by SEAL surveillance training. Matthews occupied the central command position, while his expanded group established communication patterns and movement coordination that resembled military tactical deployment rather than casual dining behavior. Admiral Morrison positioned himself in the command building with direct visual access to mess hall entrances, while Master Chief Patterson maintained radio contact with strategically placed security personnel. Their observation protocols required careful balance between response readiness and maintaining Chin's operational cover until mission parameters authorized revelation. Davis attempted intervention by increasing his supervisory presence during the dinner service. Those authority limitations prevented direct confrontation with a coordinated group behavior that operated within technical conduct boundaries. His documentation efforts provided legal coverage while acknowledging his inability to prevent the approaching confrontation. Matthews completed his meal with theatrical slowness while maintaining eye contact with Chun that conveyed anticipation and threat wrapped in false military courtesy. His followers mirrored his behavior patterns while positioning themselves for rapid movement toward the storage area when their leader provided the predetermined signal. Chun finished serving the main course with professional efficiency while internally preparing for mission completion through identity revelation when harassment escalated beyond documentation requirements. Her SEAL training provided confidence in handling 27 hostile personnel, though operational success demanded allowing maximum escalation before terminating her cover. The expanded group's conversation topics shifted to discussions about teaching respect and ensuring proper understanding of military hierarchy among civilian support personnel. Their volume increased to ensure Chun overheard references to comprehensive education and the importance of learning appropriate behavior through direct experience. Rodriguez completed his supervisory duties with unusual reluctance, his protective instincts conflicting with kitchen protocols that required his departure before evening cleanup procedures. His final warning glance toward Chun received acknowledging nod that masked her combat readiness and emergency response activation. Matthews provided his signal through subtle gesture as Chun entered the storage area to restock dinner service supplies. His followers immediately abandoned their dining positions with coordinated precision that confirmed extensive planning and tactical rehearsal for the approaching confrontation. Admiral Morrison received confirmation of Chen's location through surveillance assets, while authorizing response team deployment to positions immediately adjacent to the storage area. The institutional response machinery engaged with military efficiency while maintaining operational security around Chen's classified identity until mission parameters demanded revelation. The storage room door closed behind Chun as she arranged supply containers with methodical precision, her enhanced awareness tracking footsteps and conversation volume indicating approach of hostile personnel. Her emergency beacon confirmed Admiral Morrison's response team readiness, while her SEAL training prepared for tactical advantage through positioning and equipment accessibility. Matthews led his expanded group toward the storage area with confidence born of numerical superiority and institutional protection that had enabled his harassment campaign to escalate without meaningful consequences. His approaching footsteps marked the final moments before systematic harassment would evolve into direct confrontation that would terminate both his campaign and Chen's mission through violence revelation of her true identity. 15 sets of boots entered the storage area with coordinated precision as Chun arranged canned goods on the steel shelving unit. Matthews led the formation while Webb and Sullivan flanked him, their positioning creating an immediate tactical disadvantage that blocked her direct path to the door. The remaining 12 recruits spread into a semicircle that eliminated escape routes while maintaining enough distance to appear conversational rather than threatening. Matthews stepped forward with the confidence of numerical superiority and institutional protection that had enabled his harassment campaign to escalate without consequences. His opening statement accused Chun of failing to understand military hierarchy and showing insufficient respect for the warriors who protected her civilian freedoms through blood sacrifice and honor. The verbal assault gained momentum as Tommy Rodriguez contributed observations about women taking positions from qualified men who had earned their places through merit rather than diversity quotas. His words triggered supportive responses from the surrounding recruits as they developed themes about physical weakness and mental inadequacy that made female participation inappropriate for military environments. Webb moved closer while describing his sister's failure at basic training, suggesting that civilian women lacked the mental toughness required for supporting combat operations. His advancement reduced Chen's maneuvering space while Sullivan approached from the opposite angle, their coordinated positioning creating psychological pressure through proximity and implied physical threat. Chen maintained her distressed civilian persona while mentally cataloging each recruit's participation level and positioning for tactical assessment. Her SEAL training automatically identified weapon accessibility, environmental advantages, and neutralization sequences while mission parameters demanded continued endurance of escalating harassment until documentation objectives were achieved. The recruits took turns contributing to the verbal intimidation campaign with practiced efficiency that revealed extensive rehearsal and coordination. Danny Park remained silent near the back of the formation, his uncomfortable expression confirming internal conflict between peer pressure and personal ethics that Matthews had exploited through unit cohesion manipulation. Matthews escalated his accusations to suggest that Chen's presence endangered military personnel through incompetence and distraction that could cost lives in combat situations. His rhetoric positioned her removal as patriotic duty while building justification for physical intimidation that would force her resignation from military support roles. Sullivan described boot camp experiences where weak personnel had been eliminated through legitimate training pressure, implying that Chun needed similar education about her inappropriate presence in military environments. His storytelling created entertainment for the surrounding group while normalizing aggressive behavior as traditional military practice. The semicircle tightened as Webb gestured for closer positioning while continuing his monologue about civilian ignorance regarding military standards and warrior culture. Their movement coordination demonstrated tactical planning that transformed harassment into military operation with clear objectives and systematic execution protocols. Chun tracked Admiral Morrison's response team approach through enhanced situational awareness while maintaining her cornered victim appearance. Her emergency beacon confirmed security personnel positioning in adjacent areas, while operational parameters required enduring maximum escalation before revealing her identity to achieve complete documentation of institutional failure. Matthews grabbed her shoulder with sudden violence, while accusing her of ignoring his educational efforts about proper respect for military hierarchy. His grip demonstrated dominance, while positioning her against the steel shelving where retreat options were eliminated and physical vulnerability was maximized through environmental constraints. The group responded with cheers and encouragement that transformed individual harassment into pack behavior driven by collective aggression and masculine performance for peer approval. Their vocal support created feedback loop that escalated Matthews' confidence while normalizing assault through group participation and shared responsibility. Webb pushed closer while demanding verbal acknowledgement of her inferior status within military environments, his proximity creating claustrophobic pressure designed to trigger panic response and submission. Sullivan blocked her peripheral vision while adding threats about consequences for civilian personnel who failed to demonstrate appropriate gratitude for military protection. Chen's SEAL reflexes identified optimal neutralization techniques for multiple hostile targets in confined space, while mission requirements demanded continued endurance despite genuine physical danger reaching unacceptable thresholds. Her internal conflict between tactical training and operational objectives intensified as harassment evolved into assault with potential for serious injury. Matthews shoved her against the shelving unit with enough force to rattle stored supplies, while declaring that civilian women needed physical education about military hierarchy and their subordinate position within warrior culture. His escalation crossed from psychological intimidation to battery, while his followers provided vocal encouragement that eliminated individual accountability through collective participation. The recruits surrounded her with closing formation that prevented movement while maintaining enough space for Matthews to demonstrate physical dominance through continued assault. Their positioning created amphitheater effect, where her degradation became entertainment that bonded the group through shared violation of ethical boundaries. Rodriguez discovered the empty kitchen and realized Chen's location through elimination of other possibilities, his protective instincts overcoming protocol requirements as he moved toward the storage area. His approach provided potential intervention, though his authority limitations against coordinated group behavior reduced his effectiveness in stopping systematic assault. Matthews raised his hand in striking position while delivering ultimatum about learning proper respect through direct physical education that would ensure appropriate civilian behavior in future military interactions. His threatened violence represented crossing of legal threshold that transformed harassment into felonious assault requiring immediate response regardless of mission parameters. Chen's SEAL training demanded neutralization of immediate physical threat, while operational requirements insisted on maximum documentation through continued endurance of escalating assault. Her tactical assessment identified optimal strike sequences for eliminating multiple targets, while mission success required absorbing threatened violence until institutional response validated complete failure of command structure. The moment balanced on the edge of serious violence as Matthews prepared to deliver educational strike, while 15 recruits provided audience and encouragement for assault against defenseless civilian women. Their collective participation created legal conspiracy while demonstrating institutional breakdown that enabled systematic harassment to evolve into criminal behavior without meaningful intervention. Admiral Morrison's response team confirmed tactical positioning adjacent to storage area while awaiting authorization for intervention that would terminate both harassment campaign and Chen's classified mission through exposure of institutional vulnerability that demanded immediate correction through command action. Matthews' hand descended toward Chen's face with the confident expectation of delivering educational violence to a defenseless civilian woman. His strike carried the weight of 15 witnesses and months of institutional protection that had enabled his harassment campaign to escalate without meaningful consequences. The moment represented complete dominance through physical assault, while his followers provided encouraging audience for systematic degradation. Chen's response eliminated his advantage through movements that defied every assumption about her capabilities and training. Her left hand intercepted his wrist with precision that spoke of thousands of hours perfecting combat techniques, while her right palm struck his solar plexus with controlled force that doubled him over without causing permanent injury. The defensive sequence lasted less than 2 seconds, but transformed the entire dynamic from assault to tactical control. The recruits froze as their target became predator through fluid transition that revealed military training far beyond anything they possessed. Matthews stumbled backward while gasping for breath, his confident expression replaced by confusion and dawning recognition that his victim had demonstrated expertise that contradicted every assumption about civilian kitchen staff. Chen shifted into combat stance with automatic precision that positioned her for optimal engagement against multiple threats while controlling access to improvised weapons within the storage environment. Her movement patterns exhibited the economy of motion that characterized special operations training, creating tactical advantage where moments before she had appeared helpless and cornered. Her voice dropped to command tone that carried unmistakable authority when she ordered them to stand down immediately. The transformation from distressed civilian to military professional shocked the surrounding recruits into silence as their entertainment became demonstration of their complete tactical inadequacy against someone with genuine combat experience. Webb took an involuntary step backward while his mind processed the contradiction between Chen's apparent vulnerability and her obvious fighting capability. Sullivan's mouth opened in wordless surprise as he recognized movements that suggested advanced military training far beyond basic combat instruction provided to standard recruits. Matthews straightened while demanding to know who she thought she was, his outrage masking growing uncertainty about the situation he had created through systematic harassment. His assumption of civilian helplessness had been shattered by defensive techniques that indicated professional warrior training rather than kitchen staff background. Danny Park moved toward the back of the group as recognition dawned that they had made a catastrophic error in target selection. His military family background provided sufficient knowledge to identify elite combat techniques when demonstrated with the precision Chun had just displayed. Chun reached beneath her uniform shirt and removed the dog tags that had remained hidden throughout her investigation, their metallic shine catching fluorescent light as she held them where all 15 recruits could observe the insignia that identified her true military status and specialty training. The Navy SEAL trident gleamed against her palm, while confused murmurs rippled through the assembled group. Webb leaned forward for closer examination before whispering explanation to recruits who lacked sufficient military knowledge to understand the significance of the symbol they were observing. His quiet description of SEAL selection requirements and mission capabilities created spreading comprehension among the group as they realized their harassment target possessed training that exceeded their combined military experience. The trident represented elite warrior status that made their intimidation attempts appear pathetically inadequate rather than threatening. Tommy Rodriguez stepped backward while processing the information that their kitchen victim belonged to the most elite special operations community within the United States military. His earlier comments about women lacking warrior capability now seemed ridiculous when confronted with someone who had survived training that eliminated 90% of male candidates. Sullivan's complexion paled as he understood they had spent weeks systematically harassing someone capable of neutralizing their entire group without assistance or advanced warning. His fraternity experience with hazing provided no preparation for confronting genuine military elite who had endured selection processes that broke accomplished athletes and combat veterans. Chen announced her rank as lieutenant while identifying her assignment to SEAL Team 6, the designation that represented the apex of special operations capability within American military structure. Her calm delivery contrasted sharply with the growing panic among recruits who comprehended the magnitude of their institutional transgression. The 15 young men realized simultaneously that their harassment campaign had targeted someone whose military credentials exceeded those of their drill instructors and company commanders. Matthews' leadership position meant nothing when confronted with operational experience that included classified missions and combat deployments beyond their comprehension. Park moved further toward the exit while recognizing that their systematic intimidation of elite special operations personnel would generate consequences that extended far beyond company discipline to institutional investigation and potential criminal prosecution. His family's military background provided understanding of how seriously command structure regarded assault against SEAL personnel. Matthews attempted to maintain authority through continued demands for explanation, though his voice carried uncertainty that revealed his growing awareness of having created an impossible situation through months of escalating harassment. His confident assumptions about civilian helplessness had been destroyed by demonstration of capability that exceeded his own training by orders of magnitude. Chun maintained tactical positioning while tracking each recruit's stress response and potential for continued aggression. Her SEAL experience included crowd control and hostage situations that provided relevant expertise for managing multiple hostile personnel in confined spaces until backup arrived. The storage room door opened as Rodriguez entered, followed immediately by Admiral Morrison and Master Chief Patterson. Their arrival confirmed that Chen's emergency beacon had functioned properly while providing command authority necessary for handling institutional crisis that extended beyond simple harassment to assault against classified special operations personnel. Morrison's presence eliminated any remaining doubt about the seriousness of the situation, while his expression conveyed barely controlled anger at discovering systematic harassment of SEAL personnel under his command authority. The Admiral's arrival marked transition from harassment investigation to formal military justice proceedings with potential for criminal prosecution and dishonorable discharge. The 15 recruits understood their military careers had effectively ended through their systematic campaign against someone whose service record included classified operations and combat experience that represented the pinnacle of American military capability. Their months of harassment would generate consequences that destroyed their futures while validating every institutional failure that had enabled their behavior to escalate without intervention. Admiral Morrison's presence transformed the storage room atmosphere from chaotic confrontation to formal military proceeding with command authority that eliminated any remaining illusion about the situation's gravity. His steel-gray eyes surveyed the 15 recruits with the cold assessment of someone who had spent 3 decades identifying institutional failures and individual misconduct that threatened military effectiveness. Master Chief Patterson flanked the Admiral while base security personnel positioned themselves at strategic points that prevented recruit movement while maintaining professional protocol. Their coordinated response demonstrated institutional machinery engaging with full authority to address systematic harassment that had escalated to assault against classified special operations personnel. Chun shifted from combat readiness to formal reporting posture as she provided concise tactical assessment of recruit behavior patterns and harassment escalation timeline. Her professional delivery included specific documentation of coordinated intimidation tactics, verbal assault themes, and physical confrontation that constituted criminal battery against military personnel. Matthews attempted to interrupt with justification about unit cohesion and military standards, his voice carrying desperate authority that had dominated recruit interactions for months. Admiral Morrison's command presence silenced him with single glance that conveyed institutional power sufficient to end military careers through administrative action rather than extended discussion. The Admiral's order for immediate recruit separation eliminated group cohesion that had enabled coordinated harassment while creating individual accountability that would determine consequences based on participation level and leadership responsibility. Security personnel began escort procedures that would transport each recruit to isolated interview facilities where their statements will be documented without peer influence. Dr. Sarah Kim arrived with psychological evaluation protocols designed to assess individual culpability and institutional vulnerability that had enabled systematic harassment to develop without effective intervention. Her emergency response included mental health screening for both perpetrators and institutional personnel who had failed to recognize dangerous escalation patterns. Rodriguez entered the storage area with visible relief at discovering Chun unharmed while carrying documentation that supported her investigation findings. His witness testimony included specific observations about coordinated harassment tactics and institutional failures that had created hostile working environment for female personnel throughout the facility. Security technician arrived with mobile equipment for reviewing mess hall surveillance footage that would provide visual confirmation of harassment patterns documented through Chen's investigation. The recorded evidence eliminated any potential dispute about coordinated nature of intimidation campaign, while establishing timeline and participation levels for disciplinary proceedings. Matthews faced immediate removal from recruit leadership position as Admiral Morrison announced suspension, pending formal investigation and potential court-martial proceedings. His attempt to maintain authority through continued justification met command termination that demonstrated institutional intolerance for harassment regardless of perpetrator rank or previous performance. Webb and Sullivan received escort to isolation facilities where their interviews would determine appropriate charges based on their roles as primary enforcers within the harassment campaign. Their physical intimidation tactics and assault participation warranted serious disciplinary consideration that could result in criminal prosecution rather than administrative discipline. Admiral Morrison commended Chen's mission execution while expressing institutional concern about the personal risk she had endured during investigation that revealed systematic failures extending beyond individual misconduct to command negligence. Her professional performance under dangerous circumstances demonstrated SEAL capability while exposing vulnerability that threatened operational security. The investigation scope expanded as command recognized that harassment patterns documented by Chen indicated institutional problems that extended throughout the training facility rather than isolated incidents within Alpha Company. Her systematic documentation revealed administrative failures and supervisory negligence that required comprehensive review and policy modification. Chen's tactical debrief included assessment of institutional vulnerability that enabled sophisticated harassment campaigns to operate with effective impunity through exploitation of administrative gaps and command structure weaknesses. Her professional analysis identified systemic issues that threatened military effectiveness and personnel retention across multiple units. Danny Park's interview revealed internal conflict between personal ethics and peer pressure that characterized bystander participation in systematic harassment. His family military background provided understanding of proper conduct, while social dynamics had prevented effective intervention during escalating intimidation campaign. Rodriguez received formal commendation for his protective efforts within limited authority, while his testimony provided crucial validation of Chen's investigation findings. His documentation of suppressed complaints and institutional inaction demonstrated supervisory awareness that had been frustrated by administrative paralysis and command negligence. Base psychologist assessment revealed Matthews exhibited concerning personality patterns that suggested systematic manipulation capability combined with leadership influence that made him particularly dangerous when provided with institutional protection. Her evaluation recommended immediate separation and comprehensive psychological review for similar patterns throughout the facility. Admiral Morrison coordinated with Naval Command regarding institutional policy implications while emphasizing immediate implementation of enhanced harassment reporting protocols and supervisory accountability measures. The investigation findings demanded systematic reform rather than individual discipline to address vulnerability that enabled systematic abuse. Security footage review confirmed coordinated harassment tactics and systematic intimidation that supported Chen's documentation while providing evidence for potential criminal prosecution of primary perpetrators. The visual confirmation eliminated any remaining doubt about deliberate nature of harassment campaign and institutional failure to provide effective intervention. Master Chief Patterson assumed responsibility for recruit company reorganization while implementing enhanced oversight protocols designed to prevent similar harassment patterns from developing within training environment. His institutional experience provided capability for identifying early warning indicators that previous supervisory structure had failed to recognize. Chen's mission completion report included recommendations for institutional reform that addressed both individual accountability and systematic vulnerability that enabled harassment campaigns to operate without effective detection or intervention. Her SEAL perspective provided unique insight into institutional weaknesses that threatened operational effectiveness and personnel safety. The interview process revealed varying levels of participation among the 15 recruits, while establishing clear hierarchy of responsibility that would determine appropriate consequences ranging from additional training to criminal prosecution. Individual accountability replaced group protection as administrative isolation eliminated peer influence and leadership manipulation. Dr. Kim's psychological screening identified institutional culture issues that had normalized discriminatory behavior, while providing psychological cover for systematic harassment through appeals to military tradition and masculine identity. Her assessment recommended comprehensive cultural modification in addition to individual discipline and leadership accountability. Admiral Morrison's institutional assessment concluded that systematic harassment represented institutional failure that required immediate command attention and comprehensive reform to restore operational effectiveness and personnel confidence in military justice system. The investigation findings demanded action that extended beyond individual cases to fundamental policy modification and cultural transformation. The investigation expanded beyond Alpha Company as Chen's documented evidence revealed harassment patterns across multiple training units throughout Naval Training Center San Diego. Her systematic intelligence gathering had uncovered institutional vulnerability that enabled coordinated discrimination campaigns to operate with effective impunity across the entire facility rather than isolated misconduct within single companies. Interview transcripts from the 15 separated recruits provided detailed confession of Matthews' sophisticated organization methods and psychological manipulation techniques. Webb admitted to receiving specific instructions about physical intimidation tactics, while Sullivan described coordination meetings disguised as recreational conversations where harassment strategies were planned and refined. Dr. Kim's psychological evaluation identified Matthews as exhibiting narcissistic personality disorder combined with advanced manipulation capabilities that made him exceptionally dangerous when provided with leadership authority and institutional protection. Her assessment recommended immediate military separation and potential criminal prosecution for systematic abuse that extended far beyond the documented assault against Chun. The 3 female recruits who had filed previous complaints returned to provide additional testimony that revealed the full scope of Matthews' harassment campaign spanning 8 months of systematic intimidation. Their statements described identical tactical approaches and coordinated group behavior that demonstrated extensive planning rather than spontaneous misconduct. Recruit Maria Santos detailed physical blocking tactics and verbal degradation that matched precisely the harassment Chun had experienced, confirming systematic methodology rather than isolated incidents. Her testimony included documentation of complaint suppression and administrative delays that had protected Matthews while creating hostile environment for female personnel. Petty Officer Jennifer Walsh provided testimony about coordinated exclusion from training activities and deliberate sabotage of equipment that endangered her safety during technical instruction. Her formal complaint had disappeared into administrative processing where it remained unaddressed while harassment escalated to dangerous levels. Specialist Rebecca Torres described verbal assault and physical intimidation that forced her to request transfer from Alpha Company training track, though administrative barriers had prevented effective resolution while enabling continued harassment of subsequent female personnel. Her statement demonstrated institutional pattern of victim punishment rather than perpetrator accountability. Admiral Morrison briefed Naval Command via secure video conference regarding institutional policy failures that had enabled systematic harassment to develop without effective detection or intervention. His assessment included recommendations for service-wide protocol revision and enhanced supervisory accountability measures to prevent similar institutional breakdowns. Commander Sarah Mitchell arrived from SEAL Team 6 to conduct mission completion assessment and provide expert consultation on special operations perspective regarding institutional vulnerability. Her classified briefing with Admiral Morrison included strategic implications of harassment patterns that threatened operational security and personnel readiness. The interview process revealed Danny Park's internal conflict between family military values and peer pressure that had prevented effective intervention despite recognizing ethical violations. His testimony provided insight into bystander psychology and institutional culture that normalized discriminatory behavior through appeals to unit cohesion and masculine identity. Park's counseling session with Dr. Kim explored leadership responsibility and moral courage requirements for military service while addressing psychological factors that enabled passive participation in systematic harassment. His family background provided ethical foundation for rehabilitation rather than punitive discipline. Rodriguez received formal commendation from Admiral Morrison for his protective efforts and witness testimony that supported institutional reform initiatives. His documentation of supervisory limitations and administrative barriers provided crucial evidence for policy modification that would enhance authority for intervention in harassment situations. Base security analysis of surveillance footage confirmed coordinated harassment tactics across multiple locations throughout the facility, demonstrating systematic campaign rather than isolated incidents. The visual evidence supported Chen's documentation while providing material for potential criminal prosecution of primary perpetrators. Petty Officer Davis faced formal review of his supervisory failures and inadequate response to documented harassment complaints. His administrative paralysis and reluctance to intervene had enabled escalation while creating perception of institutional tolerance for discriminatory behavior among both perpetrators and victims. The investigation uncovered administrative suppression of harassment complaints through bureaucratic delays and processing failures that protected perpetrators while isolating victims. Matthews had understood institutional weaknesses sufficiently to exploit administrative gaps that prevented effective accountability and encouraged continued misconduct. Dr. Kim's institutional assessment identified cultural factors that had normalized harassment through appeals to military tradition and warrior identity, while providing psychological justification for systematic discrimination. Her recommendations included comprehensive cultural modification through training, leadership accountability, and policy enforcement. Matthews faced formal charges including assault, systematic harassment, abuse of leadership position, and criminal conspiracy for organizing coordinated intimidation campaign against multiple female personnel. His court-martial proceedings would address both individual accountability and institutional deterrent effect. Webb and Sullivan received charges for assault participation, harassment coordination, and conspiracy while facing potential criminal prosecution rather than administrative discipline. Their physical intimidation tactics and enforcement roles warranted serious consequences that would demonstrate institutional intolerance for systematic abuse. Admiral Morrison announced immediate implementation of enhanced harassment reporting protocols that eliminated administrative barriers and provided direct access to command authority for intervention. The policy changes included mandatory response timelines and supervisory accountability measures designed to prevent future institutional failures. The remaining 12 Alpha Company recruits faced disciplinary review, with consequences ranging from additional training to formal reprimand based on their participation levels and leadership potential. Individual accountability replaced group protection, while rehabilitation opportunities were provided for recruits who demonstrated genuine remorse and commitment to ethical conduct. Chen's final mission report included comprehensive assessment of institutional vulnerability and specific recommendations for policy modification that would prevent similar harassment campaigns from developing undetected. Her SEAL expertise provided unique perspective on systematic weaknesses that threatened both personnel safety and operational effectiveness. Base-wide harassment awareness training received scheduling priority, while all supervisory personnel faced mandatory education regarding recognition and intervention protocols. The institutional response demonstrated commitment to cultural transformation rather than cosmetic policy adjustments that failed to address underlying vulnerability. Investigation findings revealed that Matthews' harassment campaign represented systematic exploitation of institutional weaknesses rather than individual misconduct, demanding comprehensive reform that addressed both individual accountability and structural modifications necessary for preventing similar abuse patterns from developing in future training environments. The court-martial proceedings against Matthews concluded with dishonorable discharge and 18 months military confinement for assault, systematic harassment, and criminal conspiracy. Judge Advocate General Captain Rebecca Stone delivered the sentence while emphasizing institutional intolerance for leadership abuse and systematic discrimination that threatened military effectiveness and personnel safety. Matthews maintained defiant expression during sentencing despite overwhelming evidence that included surveillance footage, witness testimony, and documented coordination of harassment campaigns spanning 8 months. His conviction established legal precedent for prosecution of sophisticated psychological warfare directed against fellow service members through exploitation of administrative vulnerabilities. Webb faced formal reprimand and mandatory sensitivity training after pleading guilty to harassment participation and physical intimidation. His admission of guilt enabled disciplinary resolution without extended legal proceedings, while his cooperation during investigation provided mitigation that prevented criminal prosecution despite serious misconduct. Sullivan received identical disciplinary action with additional requirement for anger management counseling after psychological evaluation revealed impulse control issues that contributed to aggressive behavior during coordinated harassment activities. His rehabilitation program included mentorship with senior enlisted personnel who would monitor his professional development and ethical conduct. The remaining 12 Alpha Company recruits completed disciplinary review that resulted in consequences ranging from formal counseling to written reprimands based on their participation levels and demonstrated remorse. Each received mandatory ethics training, while those showing leadership potential entered enhanced mentorship programs designed to develop moral courage and institutional responsibility. Admiral Morrison implemented comprehensive harassment reporting protocols that eliminated bureaucratic delays while providing direct access to command authority for immediate intervention. The new system included mandatory response timelines, supervisor accountability measures, and regular assessment protocols that prevented administrative suppression of complaints. Chun provided expert consultation during policy development sessions where her SEAL Team 6 experience offered unique perspective on institutional vulnerability and operational security implications. Her recommendations influenced service-wide protocols that balanced personnel protection with mission effectiveness while maintaining operational readiness standards. Dr. Kim established mandatory psychological evaluation for all leadership positions within the training facility, creating screening protocols that identified personality disorders and manipulation tendencies before they could exploit institutional authority. Her assessment framework became model for implementation across naval training commands throughout the service. Rodriguez received promotion to senior mess hall supervisor with enhanced authority to report disciplinary issues directly to command structure without administrative intermediaries. His new position included responsibility for training junior supervisors in harassment recognition and intervention techniques while maintaining safe working environment for all personnel. The promotion ceremony recognized Rodriguez's protective efforts during Chen's investigation while acknowledging supervisory limitations that had previously prevented effective intervention. Admiral Morrison personally commended his integrity and commitment to personnel welfare despite institutional barriers that had complicated his response options. Petty Officer Davis faced reassignment to administrative duties with mandatory completion of leadership accountability training before consideration for future supervisory positions. His failure to intervene during documented harassment demonstrated leadership inadequacy that required comprehensive remediation through education and supervised practice. Davis's remedial training included case study analysis, ethical decision-making workshops, and mentorship with experienced senior enlisted personnel who demonstrated effective intervention techniques. His rehabilitation program emphasized moral courage development and institutional responsibility for protecting personnel under supervisory authority. Base-wide harassment awareness training received implementation priority with mandatory participation for all personnel regardless of rank or assignment. The comprehensive program included recognition techniques, intervention protocols, and reporting procedures while emphasizing individual responsibility for maintaining professional environment free from discrimination and intimidation. Training modules addressed bystander responsibility, leadership accountability, and institutional consequences for harassment participation while providing practical scenarios that prepared personnel for effective intervention. The education program emphasized prevention through early recognition rather than reactive response after escalation occurred. Chun completed her final mission report with comprehensive documentation of institutional vulnerabilities and specific recommendations for policy modification. Her analysis included tactical assessment of harassment methodologies, administrative weakness exploitation, and command structure failures that enabled systematic abuse to develop without detection. The classified report influenced Naval Special Operations Command protocols for personnel protection and institutional security while providing case study material for leadership education throughout Special Operations community. Her professional expertise enhanced understanding of institutional vulnerability that threatened both personnel welfare and operational effectiveness. Admiral Morrison coordinated with Naval Command regarding service-wide policy implications while implementing immediate reforms that addressed systematic weaknesses identified through Chen's investigation. His institutional changes included enhanced supervisory training, administrative accountability measures, and cultural modification initiatives. The 3 female recruits who had filed previous complaints received formal apologies from command leadership, along with comprehensive case review that acknowledged institutional failures. Maria Santos, Jennifer Walsh, and Rebecca Torres participated in policy development sessions where their experiences informed prevention protocols and intervention procedures. Their testimony provided crucial perspective for developing effective harassment recognition training, while their participation in policy creation demonstrated institutional commitment to addressing victim concerns rather than protecting perpetrator interests. Command acknowledgement of previous failures enabled healing while preventing similar institutional breakdown. Santos received formal commendation for her courage in reporting harassment despite institutional barriers, while Walsh returned to technical training with enhanced support and supervision. Torres accepted transfer opportunity that aligned with her career goals while receiving guarantee of harassment-free environment through enhanced oversight protocols. Base climate assessment, conducted 60 days after policy implementation, revealed dramatic improvement in personnel confidence regarding harassment reporting and command response. Female recruitment rates increased while training completion statistics improved across all demographics, demonstrating institutional effectiveness through cultural transformation. Dr. Kim's follow-up psychological assessment showed significant reduction in harassment incidents while identifying early intervention successes that prevented escalation. Her research contributions influenced Department of Defense policy development regarding institutional harassment prevention and leadership psychological screening throughout military training environments. 3 months after the court-martial proceedings concluded, Naval Training Center San Diego emerged as a model installation for harassment prevention and institutional accountability. Admiral Morrison's comprehensive reforms had transformed the facility culture while demonstrating that systematic change required both individual consequences and structural modification to address underlying vulnerabilities. Chen returned to SEAL Team 6 headquarters with formal commendation for mission execution under dangerous circumstances that had exposed critical institutional weaknesses. Her classified operation contributed to Naval Special Operations Command protocols for harassment prevention while providing case study material for leadership education throughout the Special Operations community. Commander Mitchell presented Chun with the Navy Achievement Medal during a classified ceremony that acknowledged her professional performance while maintaining operational security around the investigation details. Her courage in maintaining cover despite escalating physical danger had enabled complete documentation of institutional failure while protecting other potential victims. Alpha Company received complete reconstitution under new leadership with enhanced oversight measures that prevented coordinated harassment from developing undetected. Senior Chief Petty Officer Maria Gonzalez assumed command responsibility with authority to implement immediate disciplinary action and direct access to Admiral Morrison for serious conduct issues. The new leadership structure included mandatory mentorship programs that paired experienced personnel with recruit leadership positions, while psychological evaluation protocols screened for manipulation tendencies and discriminatory attitudes. Company culture shifted from aggressive masculinity to professional military bearing that emphasized mutual respect and mission effectiveness. Rodriguez implemented comprehensive mess hall safety procedures that created secure working environment for all personnel regardless of gender or assignment. His enhanced authority enabled immediate intervention in harassment situations, while direct reporting access to command eliminated administrative delays that had previously protected perpetrators. Daily operations under Rodriguez's supervision demonstrated institutional commitment to personnel protection through visible leadership presence and zero tolerance for discriminatory behavior. His promotion had eliminated supervisory paralysis while providing practical example of command support for protective intervention regardless of perpetrator rank or influence. Danny Park graduated from recruit training with honor distinction while demonstrating remarkable leadership transformation through active support of female personnel. His family military values had overcome peer pressure through counseling and mentorship that developed moral courage necessary for effective intervention in harassment situations. Park's assignment to Officer Candidate School included specialized training in harassment prevention and bystander intervention techniques. His personal experience with ethical conflict provided unique perspective for educating future leaders about institutional responsibility and the courage required for protecting personnel under their authority. Admiral Morrison briefed Pentagon officials regarding institutional changes and their measurable effectiveness through comprehensive statistical analysis. His presentation included harassment incident reduction, personnel retention improvement, and climate assessment data that demonstrated successful cultural transformation through systematic policy implementation. The Pentagon Briefing influenced Department of Defense policy development regarding military training environment standards and supervisory accountability measures. Morrison's institutional model received adoption consideration for implementation across all service training facilities, while his leadership approach became case study for senior command education programs. Base climate surveys conducted quarterly showed sustained improvement in personnel confidence regarding harassment reporting and command response effectiveness. Female recruitment rates increased significantly, while training completion statistics improved across all demographic categories, validating institutional commitment to cultural transformation rather than cosmetic policy adjustments. Dr. Kim published research findings in the Military Psychology Journal regarding institutional harassment patterns and prevention strategies using anonymized case study data from Chen's investigation. Her scholarly contribution influenced academic understanding of military culture and organizational psychology while providing evidence-based recommendations for policy development. The research publication included analysis of bystander psychology, leadership accountability, and institutional factors that enabled systematic harassment to develop without effective intervention. Kim's work became required reading for military psychology programs, while influencing civilian organizational behavior studies. Security assessment protocols developed during Chen's investigation received implementation across multiple naval installations, while her tactical analysis influenced counterintelligence training regarding institutional vulnerability. Her professional expertise contributed to enhanced security awareness that protected both personnel welfare and operational effectiveness. Follow-up interviews with the 3 female recruits who had filed previous complaints revealed complete confidence restoration in institutional protection and command response capability. Santos, Walsh, and Torres reported harassment-free environments while actively participating in mentorship programs that supported subsequent female recruits. Their testimonials provided validation of institutional reform effectiveness while demonstrating healing potential when command leadership acknowledged previous failures and implemented meaningful change. Their continued service represented successful retention of qualified personnel who might otherwise have been lost through institutional indifference. The mess hall environment transformed into model workplace where professional conduct and mutual respect characterized daily operations. Personnel from other installations visited to observe harassment prevention protocols, while Rodriguez provided training consultation for implementing similar protective measures throughout naval training facilities. Webb and Sullivan completed their disciplinary programs with demonstrated attitude modification and genuine understanding of harassment impact on victims and institutional effectiveness. Their rehabilitation success validated intervention strategies that emphasized education and accountability rather than purely punitive responses to misconduct participation. Chen's final institutional assessment confirmed sustainable cultural change that extended beyond policy compliance to genuine transformation of personnel attitudes and behavioral norms. Her professional evaluation validated Admiral Morrison's comprehensive approach while providing confidence that institutional vulnerability had been effectively addressed through systematic reform. The Naval Training Center became destination for senior leadership visits, where successful harassment prevention protocols were observed and adapted for implementation across other military installations. Morrison's leadership model influenced service-wide training regarding institutional accountability and cultural transformation through systematic policy development and enforcement. 6 months after Matthews received his dishonorable discharge, Naval Training Center San Diego achieved 0 harassment incidents while maintaining the highest training completion rates in its institutional history. The cultural transformation had exceeded Admiral Morrison's expectations as systematic reform created sustainable change that extended far beyond policy compliance to genuine shift in personnel attitudes and professional conduct. Chen's classified case study became required reading at the United States Naval Academy within a leadership ethics curriculum. Midshipmen analyzed her investigation methodology while studying institutional vulnerability and the moral courage required for effective intervention when systematic harassment exploited administrative weaknesses and command structure failures. The Academy instruction emphasized how individual integrity could expose institutional breakdown while demonstrating professional excellence under dangerous circumstances. Chen's mission execution provided practical example of maintaining operational objectives despite personal risk, while her tactical analysis influenced counterintelligence education regarding insider threats and institutional security. Admiral Morrison testified before the House Armed Services Committee regarding military harassment prevention best practices developed through comprehensive institutional reform. His congressional presentation included statistical evidence of cultural transformation, while recommending service-wide adoption of enhanced reporting protocols and supervisory accountability measures. The testimony influenced federal legislation requiring standardized harassment prevention training across all military installations, while establishing mandatory response timelines and administrative accountability that eliminated bureaucratic delays. Morrison's institutional model became foundation for Department of Defense policy development, affecting hundreds of thousands of service members. Rodriguez mentored new mess hall supervisors from installations throughout the naval training system, while his protective leadership approach became standard instruction for hospitality service personnel. His practical experience in recognizing harassment patterns and implementing immediate intervention provided crucial education for preventing similar institutional failures. The mentorship program Rodriguez developed emphasized early recognition techniques and effective intervention strategies that balanced personnel protection with operational requirements. His training approach influenced supervisory education across multiple naval installations while demonstrating how enhanced authority enabled protective leadership at operational levels. Former Alpha Company members who had participated in the harassment campaign completed rehabilitation programs and volunteered as peer advocates in newly established harassment prevention initiatives. Their firsthand experience with group psychology and manipulation techniques provided unique insight for educating other personnel about recognizing and resisting systematic intimidation campaigns. Webb and Sullivan became particularly effective advocates due to their intimate understanding of coordination methods and psychological manipulation that enabled harassment escalation. Their rehabilitation success demonstrated institutional commitment to redemption through education and accountability rather than purely punitive responses that eliminated personnel without addressing underlying cultural issues. Danny Park graduated from Officer Candidate School with distinguished leadership evaluation while specializing in personnel management and institutional ethics. His assignment to Training Command included responsibility for harassment prevention education, where his personal experience with ethical conflict provided credible instruction for developing moral courage in future military leaders. Park's educational approach emphasized bystander responsibility and institutional obligation for protecting personnel regardless of social pressure or peer influence. His family military background, combined with rehabilitation experience, created authentic leadership that influenced thousands of subsequent officers through practical instruction and personal example. Base harassment reporting protocols developed during Chen's investigation received adoption across all Navy installations, while her tactical analysis influenced Marines, Army, and Air Force policy development. The service-wide implementation created standardized response procedures that eliminated administrative gaps and institutional vulnerability. Chun continued special operations missions with enhanced understanding of institutional security that complemented her tactical expertise. Her experience investigating systematic harassment provided unique perspective on insider threats and organizational vulnerability that enhanced SEAL Team 6 operational effectiveness, while contributing to counterintelligence education. Her professional development included consultation assignments where military installations requested assessment of institutional vulnerability and harassment prevention protocol effectiveness. Chen's expertise became a valuable resource for command leadership seeking to implement cultural transformation that protected personnel while maintaining operational readiness. Dr. Kim's research findings influenced Department of Defense policy regarding leadership, psychological evaluation, and institutional culture assessment throughout military training environments. Her evidence-based recommendations became standard procedure for identifying and addressing organizational factors that enabled systematic harassment to develop without effective intervention. The psychological screening protocols Kim developed received implementation across all service branches, while her institutional assessment framework influenced civilian organizational behavior studies. Her scholarly contribution created lasting impact that extended beyond military applications to corporate and educational environments where similar harassment patterns threatened institutional effectiveness. Admiral Morrison reflected on the investigation's broader lessons regarding institutional courage and leadership accountability that transcended harassment prevention to encompass fundamental military values. His experience demonstrated how acknowledging uncomfortable truths about institutional failure enabled comprehensive reform that strengthened rather than weakened military effectiveness and personnel confidence. The transformation of Naval Training Center San Diego validated Morrison's belief that institutional integrity required constant vigilance and willingness to confront systematic problems regardless of their complexity or political sensitivity. His leadership approach influenced senior command education while demonstrating practical application of military values under challenging circumstances. Chun made a brief return visit to the base during a West Coast training exercise, observing the transformed mess hall environment where professional conduct and mutual respect characterized daily operations. Her presence created quiet recognition among personnel who understood her role in institutional transformation without knowing specific details of her classified investigation. The mess hall atmosphere demonstrated sustainable cultural change that had eliminated harassment while creating positive working environment where all personnel contributed effectively to military mission. Rodriguez welcomed her return while expressing gratitude for institutional changes that enabled protective leadership and personnel safety. If this story resonated with you because you've witnessed or experienced workplace harassment, or if you've ever had to find the courage to stand up for what's right despite personal risk, share your thoughts about the importance of individual integrity in transforming institutional culture. Your own experiences with courage under pressure might inspire others to act when they witness injustice. The closing reflection emphasized how one person's commitment to truth and justice could transform entire institutions when combined with leadership willing to acknowledge failure and implement meaningful change. Chen's investigation had demonstrated that individual courage, institutional accountability, and systematic reform could create lasting transformation that protected personnel while strengthening military effectiveness and operational readiness for generations of future service members.